Well, today we've been forced to ask how many hours should India work? The debate has been raging for months, first with industry leaders calling for longer hours and now with Kerala taking the opposite route. Kerala has introduced the right to disconnect bill, a proposal that gives employees the legal right to ignore calls, messages and emails after work hours without fear of punishment. It applies to private sector jobs across industries and even sets up district committees to handle violations. It's a bold step, but not a new one entirely, especially in the global context. Countries, for instance, France, Spain, Portugal, Belgium, and even Australia already recognize the right to switch off. Kerala has now become, in that sense, the first Indian state to officially propose the same. But it does raise a couple of questions. Can India afford to slow down in a world that's speeding up? The bill directly hits sectors where always on is normal. IT, media, finance, customer support, you name it. And there's also good reason to believe this may be the need of the hour. Studies show India's workforce is among the most stressed in the world. Burnout and anxiety are rising, and the World Health Organization says mental health issues are costing the economy billions. So supporters have called it a necessary correction, a legal line between work and rest. Critics, though, have said it is impractical in a connected world. Globally, some countries, remember, enforce bans on after-hour calls and others rely on negotiated policies between companies and workers. The larger question this morning that we'll be raising with our expert is, can India, a country that often glorifies overwork, accept the right to log off? And what would that mean for leadership, for productivity, and most importantly, for mental health at work? To take that conversation forward, joining us now is someone who has led one of India's biggest FMCG brands. Mr. Sunil Alagh joins us this morning. Good morning, sir. Hope you're doing well. So, having led one of India's most iconic FMCG brands, I want to start first by taking your first reaction, your initial reaction to Kerala Right to Disconnect Bill.
My initial reaction was that, look, you cannot deny that everybody needs a balance in life. There is no question about it. But how is it going to be executed is as important as the bill itself. The question is that in India, where you have a large population which works on a casual system, now whether you have fixed income, fine. But when you have variable income, then people do, or when people are in shifts, they have contract labor, they have X number of people, then it becomes very difficult to execute, because no matter how much one tries, I have said that, look, payment on annual leave should not be extended beyond 2 years. If somebody does not come in for 2 years or 3 years, doesn't take his annual leave, he loses the amount of money. But people tend not to take annual leave. They take it for 1 week, or they take it for only 5 days. And then therefore, they are earning the amount extra of money that they have when they leave. See, it's a question of saying that, look, in a country where you have a large population who is living on variable income, like creative jobs, how are you going to keep control on advertising that on Monday morning they are supposed to come up with a campaign? Now on Friday they're asked, or Thursday they're asked, and he's thinking all the time, 24/7. How is he going to stop when he comes in? Therefore, in the film industry, for instance, now in cities like Bombay, where money is important, therefore you tend to earn beyond 1 shift, 2 shifts, 3 shifts. Actors come in for 3 shifts because they don't know how long their life will be, and how long will their lives be beyond 35, 40 when they're heroes. Very few of us make it into that kind of thing. So in villages, it will be, in rural areas, it will be very important. But in cities where money is important, then people will tend to work. And therefore, how do you execute such ideas when they want to work, when people want to work?
Mr. Alagh, but that choice is entirely, it's very person-to-person dependent, isn't it? So, for instance, I may opt for 2 jobs at the same time, but if I can go with an option of just going for one, then why should that company not have a certain set pattern in place that doesn't require me to work beyond those hours? But what I do want to ask you is, of the analysis that you've shared with us, do you think right to disconnect should be standardized across India, or it should be left to be determined by industry specific needs and, let's say, internal company policies?
The internal company policies, like for instance, if you don't take annual leave beyond 2 years or 3 years, you cannot extend it. Now, internal company policies have to have a certain amount, but people who are in IT industry where they are constantly working on timelines, now they might be given a job on Thursday. By Monday, they have to come up with something. So Friday or Saturday or Sunday, when they come up with an idea, then they're going to share it with everyone. No, so it's a question of how do you execute such a law in a country where money is important, in a country where urban areas where they work so many shifts, where they have fixed income like the government, it's very easy. But private sector, when you have variable income which is attached to your fixed income, or variable income in terms of shift working, whether you want to work one shift or two shifts. Therefore, it's very easy to bring about a law, but execution becomes important.
The pointed criticism here, Mr. Alagh, has been rewarding always on employees, and that ends up happening unintentionally. Is that also normalizing toxic work patterns? That's the first big concern that employees have pointed to.
No, it does not normalize, because if you take industries like FMCG companies, IT companies it will require, and therefore FMCG companies which sells biscuits. Now, come on, yeah. I mean, like if you're going to bring about this law, then one guy might complain, but 9 guys might not complain. Therefore, the person who is going to deal with it is going to deal in a manner where 9 people are not complaining, one person is complaining. Therefore, it is a question of FMCG companies like selling toothpaste or selling biscuits or anything like that. It's not going to be easy to execute. See, IT companies, it will be possible because, see, L&T, the chairman came along and said, how long are you going to look at your wife? But he made a remark which has gone viral at this point of time. When I met him, he said, look, I didn't mean it like that. You're going to look at your wife all the time. But all the same, in IT companies, it is very valid. But in other companies like doctors or when they work in shifts, now when there's an emergency, there's an emergency. Now, when they put in the law that if there is an emergency, then how do you define an emergency? It's an emergency that Monday morning they have to. Now, it's a question of saying 2 days is enough, 1 week is enough for you to think. Now, when is an emergency which comes in?
So you broadly categorize this as something that should be implemented keeping in mind the sector, industry. So for IT sector, for instance, you're saying it's a great plan. You've spoken about the practicality aspect, Mr. Alagh. Do you also believe employees today, and this is, where the ethics part comes in, this is what people have been saying, this is why we've been having this conversation every now and then. Do you think employees today are overworked or expected to be available beyond working hours? And that is the real problem.
No, there's a question of them being overworked is not in my mind in terms of FMCG companies. In IT companies, they might be. But I'm just saying that, look, as far as I'm concerned, as far as industry is concerned, if the guy wants to earn money, when is an emergency going to happen? Look, I said 5% must be new products in every company. Now, new products, excluding IT. Now, you're bringing in something for IT, then they are working as mad. They're working too much. They're working on deadlines all the time. Whenever you send a mail across, then it's tomorrow morning you got to come out with something. And therefore, it's barring IT companies and information technologies, entrepreneurs, for instance, they work 24/7 when they're running a company. Now you talk to an entrepreneur, like I mentor a few entrepreneurs. Now they will say that, look, when you want to work, you want to work. Therefore, it's not a question of anybody bringing in a law saying you cannot work or you will not work beyond a certain time. See, overall, yes, I fully agree that look, you must give a certain balance in life. But in countries like India, where the population is so huge, and there's unemployment and money is required in cities like Bombay, then variable income comes into play, no?
Okay, I'm going to ask you a personal question, slightly notorious too, but it's up to you whether you can choose to answer, or we can quickly move on. But have you personally experienced the need to contact employees, for instance, after work hours, and if yes, why?
No, I don't contact them on work, but it's a question of saying that I brought about a law saying that it was important in all companies that look, you cannot keep on annual leave. You must go on annual leave. That's when you take your family out. You must go on annual leave. Therefore, you cannot keep on adding so many years to when you leave. Some people were getting money for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, but it's 2, 3 years. You must go on leave at least for 2 weeks in a month, or 3 weeks in a year, or 2 weeks, or at least 2 weeks. You must go out. So I would personally say that look, it's important that you have a work ethic, and it's important that you keep on a work system. But there is a reality in India, which is unemployment, which is money required. And therefore, whether you, as a head of the company, you want to introduce something, but people will not listen to you. They want to work, they want to go out, they want to live, they want to do anything they want, and they will continue their own little systems.
Mr. Alagh, the challenge comes in how do you implement that work ethic, and the lack of that proper implementation, I think, has led this debate to the mainstream every now and then. But I also want to ask you, where should then we draw the line between dedication, intrusion into personal time, and broadly, as per you, is legislation the answer, or should it come from leadership values?
It should come from leadership values, because that's what I feel. That look, I never asked anyone in my organization to work beyond a certain time. But if they wanted to work, then it's up to them. So therefore, leadership values is very important. And each individual must work according to what he thinks is right. Bringing about legislation, how do you execute it? It's like what they add in one word, except in emergencies. What is an emergency? For doctors, an emergency is immediate. For people like who was something, emergency might mean 1 or 2 weeks later. So therefore, execution becomes ideally it's leadership values which is important.
Yeah, I don't think doctors are ever going to be included into this kind of a legislation. Practically impossible, you're correct. The other challenge is, how would you handle urgent or emergency situations if you're legally restricted from contacting employees after hours, right?
No, if you work yourself, then automatically people will come in, no? On their own. You don't have to call them, but if they see the leadership value is working on more than hours, more than something emergency, then it's an emergency. On Saturdays and Sundays, I used to work, but it happened only maybe 10 times in a year. But you never asked anyone to come in, but when you went in, then they all came in. So leadership value is important, but if you're working every Saturday, every Sunday, then it becomes tough for individuals.
And that's the start point of this fear in the younger generation, or the Gen Z. The feeling there is, Mr. Alagh, in a startup, for instance, if you don't put in the same number of hours as your boss, and you said the boss obviously in a startup as an entrepreneur is going to go all the way. If you don't put in the same kind of work, hours, effort, you're going to be thrown out. That's the fear.
No, you won't be thrown out, because when a person is an entrepreneur, then he's in any case keeps it population tight. Therefore, it's only 3 or 4 people who are working there. When it becomes 20, 30 people doing it, then it becomes important to bring in legislation. But leadership values changes on time. It is important that leadership values change according to what the situation is. Supposing a guy who is an entrepreneur is working for 24 hours, he's not working for 24 hours, but he's working for 14 hours a day, then it becomes important if only 3 people around him are working. They are the ones who are working with him. And therefore, becomes difficult to execute. There's no question in terms of ethical values. I fully agree. leadership values, I fully agree with that statement. But how are you going to execute it in a country where, see, Europe, where you brought in the law, the older people resign at 60 and then they go off. Now, how many of the population is young? Therefore, Gen Z has got to look at population when you want an employment. Gen Z wants employment. And that you have to keep in mind whenever anybody who's unemployed will take your place of employment.
Okay, now we're going to try and zoom out a little, Mr. Alagh. From your leadership experience, do you think Indian corporate culture still glorifies overwork and always on availability? At least that's the sentiment. That's what employees feel. Has it truly come down to that? What's fueling this debate every now and then?
No, it's not come down as yet, but employment is very important in our country, and therefore the government thinks about employment all the time. You have 1.5 billion people, of which 1.2 is young enough to work, and they don't have a job. So therefore, giving them employment becomes more important, and therefore it's a question of industry-wise. Like doctors have to think. Doctors are available on emergencies. So is the daily workers. Now you have a lot of casual labor. If you make contract labor permanent labor, then that's the end of any factory. Now you have so many things in India, that is 1.5 billion, that execution becomes impossible.
Yeah. So execution, you're saying broadly, is the biggest challenge in this. Kerala, if it does succeed at this, if it ends up becoming a successful model in terms of implementation and execution, Mr. Alagh, you think broadly it will be at the losing end in terms of business and investment opportunity? People are not going to look at Kerala as the ideal destination?
No, they are going to be when they are introducing it, but every law that comes in is got to be executed. Now, will they execute it? Or will they bring about a law when Parliament passes it, therefore there's a law? Now, after all, the companies, when they need a manager, all right, they need a manager for looking after the ethical part. So therefore, maybe one person will get employment in every company, which is private sector. There's not mention for public sector. Public sector is on fixed income, and therefore resign, retire, you can't get sacked. But private sector, you can get sacked. And therefore, each company will have to think of, look, it's not a question of each. In Europe, it might work. No question it will work because the population is becoming older and there are a lot of young people there, very few young people there, and therefore it works there. But in India and China, where there's 1.5 billion, it won't work unless you bring about certain laws, execution. Look, we think it's the leadership value that is important in each of the private sector. It's when the guy on top realizes that, look, I need to do this, I need to do X, that will be proper execution, not a law.
Okay, so then you already answered my last question, which was going to be what, according to you, is then the possible solution to finally put a full stop to this ongoing debate in the Indian context?
No, but I've answered it because I think that overall everybody wants more time with the family.
Yeah.
But does the family want it, or do they want you to earn money? Do they expect you to work or not work? Industry specific becomes important, and therefore you are left not law, but the leadership is most important.
Okay, it's the leadership value that counts at the end of the day. Set the right example as the leader, as the person leading the pack. Thank you so much, Mr. Alagh, for joining us with that very interesting conversation. Kerala has become the first state to look in that direction. Will other states follow suit? Remains to be seen.